Okay, we all knew this was coming, right? I mean, this game is basically what you'd get if you just took a checklist of everything that I've ever loved and made a video game based on that idea alone. You start by taking 2 parts Monster Rancher, a series most everyone watching this video already knows that I love. You then take 2 parts Ultraman, a franchise I have loved for many of my Toku watching years but have had fewer chances to gush about. Now, combine them in a blender, completely turn the lore on its head. Already did a video on that, believe it or not, and this is what you get. So at long last, I played the game to the point where I feel satisfied that I can talk about it. Special thanks to Gym Leader Ed for letting me once again steal his stream footage because my capture card is currently in a box somewhere and I'm too lazy to find it. So join me for a closer look at Ultra Kaiju Monster Rancher. Greetings everyone, this is the Hipster Snack. Today, we'll be looking at the newest Monster Rancher title, that being October 2022's Ultra Kaiju Monster Rancher. Released exclusively on Nintendo Switch eShop here in the West, and I still hold out hope for a PC port sometime in the near future, this game serves as a proper Monster Rancher installment, if you can believe it. Story-wise, we open on a remote island, La Tour, where the myth of monsters being sealed into saucers takes on a slight new twist. Rather than God placing the monsters into the saucers, a giant of light sealed enormous kaiju into stones instead. And presumably because property insurance agents don't exist on this island, the island's population decided that the celebrity status job of choice is a kaiju breeder. And your journey to greatness starts with bureaucracy, as you're immediately informed your paperwork hasn't been filed properly and you're not even official. Luckily for you, Miss Monster Rancher cameo herself, Holly, steps in on your behalf, eager to work with the newbie. Based on this recommendation, you're allowed to pursue your dream and the game begins in earnest. So before we get any further, let's look into the look and sound of the game, because you guys already know that I'm going to rant for far longer than necessary, right? Right. First of all, it looks great. The city and the ranch are set low to the kaiju's feet, really giving you proper sense of scale of these kaiju. And the fact that the monsters enter battles by dropping down from the sky, causing huge earthquakes beneath their feet, gives you an appreciation for the enormous bulky size behind them. In fact, several of the kaiju move around in ways that one would expect to see for a human actor within the confines of a bulky rubber kaiju suit. The attention to detail is both adorable and incredible. People who aren't already Toku fans may not appreciate these kinds of details, but said detail doesn't detract from the experience, so hey, nice touch. Overall, the graphics look really nice, and everything is dedicated to the scale. It's just masterfully done. Audio-wise, the game maintains that big feel with a big score behind it. The background music is very catchy and sets the mood perfectly. The kaiju cries hail from their source material, which we Toku fans will always appreciate, and the battle sounds are masterfully crafted. 1 part campy, 1 part cartoony, 1 part epic. If there was a complaint that I did have to issue, at least in regards to the sound design, it's that crowing rooster who caws every single week's passing. It's kind of cute the first time you hear it, and then it becomes an entirely unnecessary and kind of annoying addition. Have it say, maybe crowing just at the start of each new month instead of every single week? A mild nuisance, but a present one that I can't not mention. Okay, time to gush. As you might have guessed, the game plays in traditional Monster Rancher fashion. I've even seen more than a small number of people speculate that this game was built on the same engine used in Monster Ranchers 1 and 2 DX, and I wouldn't be surprised were that true because there are a lot of similarities. Though we do reach one important thing of note as soon as we get to the shrine ready to regenerate our first kaiju. That being, the shrine does not use the CD list system that we saw in the DX bundle. Instead, it uses a keyword system that is very obviously a quick cover-up for the CD system because there's just a lot of weird decisions made around it that are interesting, to say the least. But the way it works is that you enter a keyword and a subword and it generates a kaiju based on it, but only in the North American release. Far as I was able to tell, this has yet to receive a European release, and the CD system is still very much present in its Asian releases. Anyway, another major difference here is the shrine costs money to use. Not much money, mind, and I am talking about in-game money here. Thankfully, there's no real-world money gacha systems here. But it does sort of discourage getting too crazy during the prologue segment, given that you aren't handed your full sum of starter funds until after you arrive on your ranch. Strange, but true facts. Anyway, just think of it like Monster Rancher Advance and pick out your kaiju. And don't even worry about the annoyingly common authorized breeder warning. That doesn't even queue in this game. If you punch in a code that would otherwise have given you a locked species, it'll just give you a random different one instead. This shrine is weird. Anyway, once you get your kaiju, you give it a name, and you're released to the ranch to raise them. When you first do this, you get confirmation that Ultraman is indeed a thing in this universe, as he'll jump down to ward off a wild kaiju. Apparently that is a problem on this island, and people still live here willingly. But then you begin in earnest. The way it works is that the kaiju travels to one of 6 spots on the island, and each location pulls double duty in both the simple and the heavy trainings. There are simple trainings that raise 1 stat a little bit, 1 for each, obviously, and the heaviest training raises 2 stats and slightly lowers the 3rd. I like this system because not only is it easy to organize on a simple menu interface like this, but that it also lends itself to having more training options than the norm. Albeit those options are still more or less broken up into tank build and squishy wizards with very little in the way of mixed methods available to the player. Over the course of the story, you'll also unlock the ability to have other breeders help raise your kaiju by pitting them against their own. This serves as the heavy training that will help unlock additional attacks when your kaiju's ready to learn them. That's the basic through line for training. My one real complaint is that the animations here are really simplistic, and you'll see them a lot, even during heavy training, where you'd think that each breeder would have their own style, but they don't. Obviously, there is a lot more nuance to this, but if I keep going on like this, we'll never get anywhere. Like usual, the game happens in turn-based fashion, where you can give your kaiju an item, talk to them, enter battles, go training, or rest each week. Each turn is one in-game week, with 12 months, each made up of 4 weeks each, as you'd well expect. However, kaiju aren't just your ordinary monsters, and there are special considerations you'll need to take. For instance, reflecting the wild and oftentimes destructive nature of kaiju, it's possible for their rage to accumulate and burst forth in the form of various rampages. Sometimes they'll break stuff because it's fun, or they'll eat tons of food which will cost you some money, or they'll damage a part of the city, costing you considerably more in the way of pocket change. And in one instance, I believe, which may be scripted, Ultraman Zero jumped down and kicked my kaiju in the head and then scolded me for losing control of it. However, rage can be quelled, both with strategic item usage, talking to your kaiju and hearing their thoughts, or by diving into the kaiju battles. Like before, battles come in 2 flavors, for money and for rank inflation. Standard tournaments can earn money, prize items, and even unlock rivals who will help train your kaiju. For newcomers, I recommend honing in on the Talisman of Light, which will help a lot with rage management. As an aside, the rage mechanic is not crippling. As your kaiju gets older, it'll have a higher threshold for its rage, and also the more times it goes on rampages, also further increasing its threshold. Official tournaments are where you go head-to-head in order to increase your rank and progress the story. Your goal is to make your kaiju strong enough to win these official cups and make it to the final tournaments of the game and become the greatest breeder there is. However, you're not limited to just that goal. You also have 3 expeditions which happen throughout the year in set months, those being February, June, and October. However, you can prepare yourself for these as you need to. You can set off for the month-long journey at any point during those 4-week spans that make up those respective months. So if your kaiju is high enough rank and has a prerequisite life stat, you can go anytime you're prepared within that time frame, rather than having to leave on the first. These expeditions will help you find not just rare items, but also the unlock conditions for increasing the number of kaiju breeds available to you at the shrine. But I feel it's important to know that Ultra Kaiju Monster Rancher doesn't take week-to-week everyday life for granted. While it will loop after a certain point, you work on the ranch alongside Holly and Kanezo, a Kanagon himself but human-sized and quite the talker, and they'll comment on things like the weather, your kaiju's growth, the seasons, how training has been recently, and more. It's all these little small touches that add a lot of life and personality to the game's environment, even if, during a good bout of training over a long span of time, you may end up skipping a good deal of it by mashing the A button to speed by. Do I love every mechanic in this game? No. There are some aspects that seem to have a bit too much randomness hinged upon them. For example, when you let your kaiju rest, they'll sometimes have a dream, which can impact how effective the rest was, but it's completely random. So sometimes this means it isn't effective at all, and you just waste precious limited time by having them be precisely as tired as they were the next week as when you told them to rest in the first place. On top of that, a major part of Kaiju growth is the trait system, where at each birthday they'll unlock an additional trade slot up to their third year, which can then be filled in by feeding them a Kaiju cookie from a particular shop in town. However, this is basically just a gacha system, where you just get them randomly, but there's no actual input on your part. Something about this system feels unfinished or unpolished, despite the fact that I actually find it kinda cool on the whole. The system allows your kaiju to get traits from other kaiju species entirely, including some that aren't raisable in the game, and some of those come from ultras. In that respect, it's very clever, just not flawless in its execution. And of course, at the end of a kaiju's lifespan, you can put it into stasis with the organization overseeing the kaiju and their breeders, and ultimately fuse them together to make stronger baby monsters. Thus, the cycle of the Monster Rancher meets seamlessly within the framework of Ultra Kaiju. Beyond that, was there anything I'd change? Well, I do feel like it's a missed opportunity to not have raisable ultras, even if they're end-game, final, last-minute post-credits unlock kind of thing. Just explain it as a rookie Ultraman looking for specialized training from the breeder, and have it fly back to the Land of Light if it ages out, like how the Phoenix worked in Monster Rancher 2. Then the monsters with an Ultra coat of paint on them get explained simply, and you indulge fans with some major fan service. But speaking of fan service, that may end up being kind of a roadblock for some. Ideally, this game is for people who are fans of both Monster Rancher and Ultraman, and with some luck, love of one will aid in learning the other. But if someone isn't familiar with either of them, which is all too common here in the English-speaking world, you might have a game that many people will overlook, in no small part due to its limited eShop release on just the Switch. Ultra series weren't readily available in the West until just the past few years, and Monster Rancher has always been a cult classic. The lack of physical release probably limits its passerby appeal that would have helped its sales were it in stores, and no PC release greatly limits market appeal. But these are things that can be fixed if Koei Tecmo and Bandai Namco make the effort to do so, and I hope that they do. Ultra Kaiju Monster Rancher absolutely is an amazing installment in the Monster Rancher universe, finally filling a void for the long-wished Monster Rancher 6, and serves as an excellent starting place for people who are curious about Ultraman. If you have a Switch, you absolutely owe it to yourself to pick it up and play it right now. And if you don't, you should tweet at the aforementioned companies for a PC port. Just saying. And that's the final word on this outstanding game. This has been the Ultra Kaiju Snack. Did you like today's episode? Hit the like button so I know. To help my channel grow kaiju size, hit the subscribe and bell icons too. It goes a long way in helping me out. Leave a comment down below. What kaiju's your favorite? And which was your first? My first was Gamora Golza. And thank you for joining me today. Continue to join me here for more reviews, Snack Tech overviews, the new home of the Tomodachi Bros Review Podcast Season 2 coming soon, and much, much more all right here. And I will see you there.